I'm Tobias, 28 years old, and I've lived my entire life in my sister Miranda's shadow. Every achievement, every milestone was measured against her perfection. But last month, something in me finally snapped. We were at our usual family dinner when my mother sneered, "You'll never be as good as your sister, not knowing I now make 6 figures while Miranda's drowning in debt." I stood up, looked her in the eye, and said, "Then, ask her to pay your bills." The room went silent. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, our house was nothing special. A modest 2-story, with fading blue paint, and a small backyard where I spent countless hours alone while my parents attended Miranda's various competitions. Our family photos told the story better than words ever could. Miranda front and center holding trophies or certificates, my mother beaming beside her with a hand on her shoulder. My father and I relegated to the background, almost afterthoughts in the composition. Miranda was 4 years older, and from the moment I could remember, she was the definition of perfection in my mother's eyes. Tall, naturally athletic, with wavy brown hair and a smile that charmed everyone from teachers to neighbors. But it wasn't just her looks. Miranda had a brain that seemed wired for academic success. Straight A's came effortlessly, and she collected academic awards like other kids collected baseball cards. My mother, Catherine, built her identity around being Miranda's mom. A former high school valedictorian herself, who gave up a potential law career to raise children, she channeled all her ambitions into my sister. Every achievement of Miranda's was meticulously documented, celebrated, and mentioned at every possible opportunity. With me, her interactions were mostly correctional. "Stand up straight. Tobias, that B+ could have been an A if you applied yourself. Why can't you focus like your sister?" My father, Robert, was a different story. A quiet man who worked as an accountant at a local firm, he seemed perpetually worn down by my mother's dominant personality. He would occasionally ruffle my hair, or give me a quiet good job when I showed him something I'd built, or a decent report card. But he never contradicted my mother, or stepped in when the comparisons became cruel. His kindness was private, almost secretive, as if he feared my mother's disapproval even more than I did. The pattern was established early. When I was 6, I brought home an art project my teacher had praised. My mother glanced at it briefly before pointing to Miranda's science award prominently displayed on the mantel. "See what real achievement looks like." My drawing ended up in a drawer somewhere forgotten. When I was 8, I scored the winning goal in a soccer game. My father clapped me on the back, but my mother was busy on the phone telling a friend about Miranda's selection for the regional spelling bee. Our living room was a shrine to Miranda's excellence. Shelves lined with trophies, walls adorned with certificates and newspaper clippings. My few achievements never made it to the wall of fame. Even when I won 2nd place in the district math competition, in 4th grade, my certificate was temporarily placed on the refrigerator before disappearing within a week. Family gatherings were exercises in humiliation. Aunts, uncles, and grandparents would flock around Miranda, asking about her latest accomplishments while I sat quietly in corners. "Miranda's going to be somebody special," they'd say within my earshot. Nobody seemed to wonder what I might become. Around 11, I discovered computers. While Miranda excelled at everything visible and valued by my mother, I found refuge in a world of code and digital creation. I spent hours learning basic programming languages, building simple games, and exploring how computers worked. When I tried to show my mother a simple program I'd written that calculated math problems, she dismissed it as playing games and reminded me that homework came first. Miranda never wasted time on video games. She said, not understanding that what I was doing was building something, creating learning skills that would later become my career. The emotional toll accumulated silently. I became the quiet kid, the one teachers described as nice but unmemorable in parent-teacher conferences. I developed a habit of downplaying my own achievements before anyone else could. If I scored well on a test, I'd immediately point out the questions I missed rather than celebrate those I got right. If I built something impressive on the computer, I'd highlight its flaws before anyone else noticed them. It was safer that way, a preemptive strike against the inevitable comparison to Miranda's perfection. In 6th grade, I joined the science club and spent months working on a project about computer algorithms for the science fair. I built a simple program that demonstrated how different sorting algorithms worked with a visual display showing their efficiency. My science teacher was impressed enough to enter me in the district competition. When the day came, I scanned the audience repeatedly looking for my parents. My father arrived just before my presentation, apologetic. My mother never showed. She was at Miranda's regional debate championship 3 hours away. I won 2nd place. The blue ribbon felt hollow as I rode home with my father in silence. When we arrived, my mother was already there, exuberant. Miranda had won 1st place in the debate. There was cake on the table with "Congratulations, Champion" written in blue icing. My ribbon was acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, Tobias," before the conversation returned to Miranda's triumph. That night I pinned my ribbon to my bulletin board and stared at it for a long time. Not because I was proud, but because I was trying to understand why it wasn't enough. Why I wasn't enough. It was the first time I consciously recognized the pattern that would define my childhood and adolescence. I wasn't disliked or abused. It was something perhaps more insidious. I was simply less important, less worthy of attention and celebration. I was the background character in the Miranda show, and my mother was her biggest fan. High school should have been a fresh start, but the shadow of Miranda's legacy loomed over me from day one. Another Parker teachers would say on the first day of class, their eyes lighting up, "Are you Miranda's brother?" The momentary excitement would fade when they realized I wasn't the second coming of the Parker family genius. Despite my growing interest in technology, my confidence had been systematically dismantled through years of unfavorable comparisons. I walked the halls with hunched shoulders and avoided eye contact, trying to become invisible to escape the weight of expectations I knew I couldn't meet. My sanctuary became the computer lab. While other kids occupied themselves with social hierarchies and sports, I immersed myself in the world of coding and digital design. The computers at school were better than what I had at home, and I spent lunch periods and free hours learning JavaScript, HTML, and basic database management. The structured logic of programming made sense to me in a way human interactions often didn't. Code either worked or it didn't. There was no subjective comparison, no moving goalpost of approval. Meanwhile, Miranda left for Princeton on a full scholarship, an achievement that became the centerpiece of every family conversation for months. My mother redecorated the living room to better showcase the Princeton pennant and Miranda's acceptance letter. She joined the Princeton Parents Association despite the geographical challenges and spoke about our family's Ivy League connection to anyone who would listen. "Your sister is setting the bar for this family," she told me repeatedly. "Princeton opens doors you can't imagine." When I asked for a $300 graphics card for my computer for Christmas, my sophomore year, my mother balked at the expense. "We need to be mindful of costs with Miranda's textbooks and living expenses," she explained, despite the fact that Miranda's scholarship covered most costs, and my father's income was stable. That same month, she spent $500 sending Miranda a care package of luxury items for her dorm room. Junior year, I developed a serious interest in programming and began talking about pursuing computer science in college. My mother's response was immediate dismissal. "Be realistic, Tobias. That field is for mathematical geniuses. Have you considered something more attainable? Community college has some very practical programs." The irony was that my grades had improved significantly. While not straight, as like Miranda's, I maintained a solid B+ average with As in computer science and related subjects. But in my mother's eyes, I remained the underachiever, the son who needed to set his sights lower. My saving grace came in the form of Mr. Reynolds, the computer science teacher who recognized something in me that my family couldn't see. After I completed an advanced project recreating classic arcade games with modern programming techniques, he kept me after class. "You have a natural aptitude for this, Tobias," he said, the first adult who had ever suggested I had a natural aptitude for anything, the way you think through problems, how you structure your code. Have you considered pursuing this after graduation? His encouragement was like water in a desert. For the first time, someone saw potential in me without the qualifier of, but not as much as Miranda. Mr. Reynolds helped me research college programs, pointed me toward online resources to advance my skills, and even connected me with former students working in the tech industry who were willing to answer my questions. With newfound purpose, I got a part-time job at Electronics Warehouse, a local store that sold computer parts and accessories. The employee discount allowed me to slowly build a better computer at home, and the income gave me a small measure of independence. I worked weekends and after school, saving most of my earnings while developing practical knowledge about hardware to complement my software skills. My mother viewed my job with the same dismissive attitude she applied to my academic interests. Miranda focused on internships that built her resume, not minimum wage jobs, she commented when I came home tired from a long shift. She never seemed to make the connection that Miranda had been offered those internships because of her Princeton connection and our family's inability to afford similar opportunities for me. Senior year brought the tension to a breaking point. I had been accepted to State University with a partial scholarship for their computer science program. It wasn't Princeton, but it was a solid program, with good job placement statistics, and affordable with my savings and financial aid. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I showed it to my father first, who gave me a genuine smile and a rare hug. "I'm proud of you, son," he said quietly when my mother wasn't in the room. "That's a great program." When I showed my mother later that evening, her response was predictable. "State University, well, I suppose that's fine if you're set on computer science. Though, I still think the community college would be more suitable." The same month, Miranda graduated from Princeton with honors and a job offer from a prestigious marketing firm in Boston. My parents flew out for her graduation, leaving me home alone despite the fact that my own high school graduation was the following week. They returned with suitcases full of Princeton memorabilia and endless stories of the ceremony, the campus, and the famous alumni they'd spotted. My graduation ceremony felt like an afterthought. My mother spent most of the time pointing out to neighboring parents which college their children were attending, her voice dropping to a whisper when forced to admit I was going to State. At my modest graduation party, attended mostly by my father's relatives, the conversation inevitably turned to Miranda's new job and apartment in Boston. As I packed for college that August, my mother made one final attempt to reshape my future. "It's not too late to reconsider, you know. Community college would leave you with so much less debt, and you could live at home." "I want to study computer science," I replied, continuing to fold clothes into my suitcase. "State has one of the best programs I can afford." "I just don't want you setting yourself up for disappointment," she sighed. "Not everyone can be Miranda." "I know, Mom," I said, zipping the suitcase closed. "You've made that perfectly clear for 18 years. It was the closest I'd come to confrontation, and the brief flash of surprise on her face gave me a small measure of satisfaction as I carried my belongings out to the used car I'd purchased with my Electronics Warehouse savings. My father helped me load the last of my things, slipping me an envelope with $500 inside. "For books," he said simply with a quick glance toward the house to make sure my mother wasn't watching. As I drove away from the only home I'd known, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. For the first time, I would be Tobias Parker, not Miranda Parker's less impressive younger brother. Whatever I became would be my own creation, not a pale comparison to someone else's brilliance. The road ahead was uncertain, but for once, that uncertainty felt like opportunity rather than inadequacy. My apartment near State University was barely 500 square feet with mismatched furniture from thrift stores and a persistent smell of the previous tenants' cooking. But it was mine, free from the constant reminders of my inadequacy that filled my childhood home. I taped a map of the campus to the wall, arranged my computer on a wobbly desk, and felt something close to pride as I surveyed my new kingdom. College hit me like a revelation. In the computer science department, nobody knew or cared about Miranda. Professors evaluated my work on its own merits, and for the first time I found myself thriving academically. The curriculum challenged me in ways high school never had, but the challenge felt invigorating rather than demoralizing. I discovered I had a particular talent for algorithm design and database architecture, earning recognition from professors who had no preconceived notions about my capabilities. Financial reality quickly set in, however. My partial scholarship and savings wouldn't cover all my expenses. I took a job at the university IT help desk, working 20 hours a week, troubleshooting computer problems for students and faculty. On weekends, I picked up shifts at a local electronics retailer similar to my high school job. Between classes, homework, and 2 jobs, sleep became a luxury I couldn't often afford. Meanwhile, Miranda's career took off like a rocket. She was quickly promoted at her marketing firm, moved into a luxury apartment in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, and began traveling internationally for client meetings. Each family phone call brought updates about her salary, increases, the important people she was meeting, and the exotic locations she visited. Thanksgiving break my freshman year was a preview of how family gatherings would unfold throughout my college years. I arrived home exhausted from finals and work only to find the dining room table decorated with photos of Miranda in Paris, where she'd recently closed a major account. My mother had invited several neighbors and extended family members for dinner, and the conversation revolved entirely around Miranda's achievements. She's being considered for senior account manager. After less than a year, my mother announced, proudly passing the mashed potatoes, the youngest in the company's history. When my aunt politely asked about my studies, I had barely mentioned my A in advanced programming before my mother interjected. "Tobias is doing fine with his computer courses," she said dismissively. "Though I still think accounting would have given him more stability. Not everyone is cut out for competitive fields." I noticed my father wince slightly, but as always he remained silent. As my college years progressed, the pattern continued. Each break brought new Miranda achievements to celebrate, and new opportunities for my mother to question my choices. "Computer science is becoming oversaturated," she would say. "So many young people thinking they'll be the next Bill Gates. Or Miranda's company provides a company car and full benefits. Will your coding jobs ever offer that kind of security?" During my junior year, I met Rachel in a database management class. Smart, practical, and refreshingly direct, she was the first person who seemed to truly see me. On our third date, I found myself unloading the whole Miranda saga, expecting her to make polite noises of sympathy before changing the subject. Instead, she looked genuinely angry on my behalf. "That's not parenting," she said firmly. "That's narcissism by proxy. Your mother's using Miranda's achievements to feed her own ego and putting you down to maintain the dynamic." Rachel became my refuge. In her tiny apartment filled with plants and computer parts in equal measure, I experienced what it felt like to be valued simply for being myself. She celebrated my academic successes, pushed me when I doubted my abilities, and never once compared me to anyone else. Senior year brought a series of triumphs that would have impressed anyone not measuring them against the Miranda scale. I graduated with honors in computer science, completed a significant capstone project that earned praise from the department head, and was mentioned in the university newsletter for my contribution to a faculty research project on database optimization. At graduation, Rachel's family cheered loudly when my name was called. My parents attended my father, smiling proudly, while my mother maintained a polite expression that suggested she was enduring rather than enjoying the ceremony. At the small celebration afterward, she managed to mention Miranda's recent promotion to the parents of my classmates no fewer than 6 times. Then came the real world, and timing was not on my side. I graduated during an economic downturn that hit the tech sector particularly hard. Entry-level programming positions that had been plentiful a year earlier suddenly had hundreds of applicants. I sent out dozens of resumes daily, had a few promising interviews that ultimately went nowhere, and watched my savings dwindle alarmingly. 3 months after graduation, I faced the humiliating prospect of moving back home. Rachel offered to let me stay with her, But her one-bedroom apartment was already crowded with her roommate, and I didn't want to strain our relationship with financial dependency. With no other options, I packed my computer and a suitcase of clothes and returned to Portland. My mother didn't say "I told you so" out loud, but it radiated from her every interaction. She arranged for me to interview at my father's accounting firm for a data entry position, making it clear she considered my computer science degree a failed experiment. My father, in rare defiance, insisted I keep looking for programming work and secretly helped me continue paying my student loans while I lived at home. Rachel and I tried to maintain our relationship long distance, but the strain of my unemployment and living situation created tension. Our calls became shorter, less frequent, and eventually stopped altogether. The breakup was mutual, but left me feeling like I'd lost the one person who believed in me without conditions. After 4 agonizing months at home enduring daily reminders of Miranda's spectacular career trajectory, I finally landed an entry-level programming position at a small tech startup working on inventory management software. The salary was modest, barely enough to afford a studio apartment with a roommate, but it was a lifeline I grabbed with both hands. The night before I moved out again, my mother made a point of calling Miranda on speakerphone during dinner. My sister had just returned from a company retreat in Bali and was being considered for the executive track. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," my mother gushed. "You've always known exactly how to make the most of your potential." She glanced at me as she said it, and I understood the subtext perfectly, unlike some people at this table. As I loaded my few belongings into my car the next morning, my father helped carry my computer equipment. In a rare moment of candor, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your path doesn't have to look like hers, Tobias," he said quietly. "Success comes in different forms." It was the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging the toxic dynamic that had shaped our family. I appreciated the sentiment, but after 2 decades of conditioning, it was difficult to believe him. According to the Gospel of Catherine Parker, there was only one form of success, and Miranda had cornered the market on it. The startup that hired me, TechFlow Solutions, operated out of a converted warehouse with concrete floors, exposed ductwork, and desks made from repurposed doors mounted on filing cabinets. The pay was barely above minimum wage, the hours were long, and the benefits non-existent. But for the first time in my professional life, I was judged solely on what I could contribute, not who I was related to. I threw myself into the work with an intensity that surprised even me. When the official workday ended at 6, I stayed until 9 or 10 learning the codebase, fixing bugs nobody had assigned me, and teaching myself new programming languages that might be useful for upcoming projects. The company couldn't afford training, so I watched online tutorials during lunch breaks and read programming books during my bus commute. My dedication didn't go unnoticed. 3 months in, I was assigned to work directly on the core product, an inventory management system used by small manufacturers. The senior developers began consulting me on database issues, recognizing my university specialization. 6 months in, I received a modest raise, and my own project to manage a customer portal that would allow clients to access their inventory data directly. Rachel and I had completely lost touch by then. My few attempts at reaching out were met with increasingly delayed and brief responses until the message became clear. She had moved on, and I needed to do the same. The breakup left a void that I filled with more work, more learning, more coding late into the night in my Spartan studio apartment. During one of our monthly phone calls, my mother asked about my living situation. "It's a studio apartment," I explained. "Small but functional." "Miranda just bought a condo," she replied without missing a beat. "2 bedrooms, waterfront view. The property values in that area are expected to increase significantly. Such a smart investment for her future." These conversations became a predictable exercise in contrast. My modest achievements measured against Miranda's spectacular ones. My small apartment versus her luxury condo. My used Honda compared to her company-leased BMW. Each comparison reinforcing what I'd been told my entire life I would never measure up. At TechFlow, I found an unexpected ally in Alex, a senior developer in his 40s, who had worked for several major tech companies before choosing the startup life. Alex noticed my late hours and self-teaching efforts and began informally mentoring me. He reviewed my code, suggested resources for improving my skills, and occasionally bought me lunch where we discussed everything from programming paradigms to career strategy. "You've got raw talent," he told me during one of these lunches, "but you need to specialize in something cutting edge if you want to advance quickly. Jack-of-all-trades programmers are common. Experts in emerging technologies can write their own tickets." Following his advice, I began focusing on blockchain technology, which was just beginning to expand beyond cryptocurrency applications into business solutions. I spent weekends building sample applications, contributed to open-source blockchain projects, and wrote technical articles for programming forums. The startup began growing, securing new clients and additional funding. My customer portal project was successful enough to become a major selling point in sales presentations. With each small victory, my confidence incrementally rebuilt itself. Not the artificial confidence of arrogance, but the quiet certainty that comes from proven competence. As the company expanded, so did my responsibilities and compensation. After 18 months, I had received enough raises to afford a better apartment without roommates. It was still nothing compared to Miranda's waterfront condo, but it was mine, paid for with my own success. During this period, my relationship with my family settled into a predictable pattern. Monthly phone calls with my mother that left me emotionally drained. Occasional one-on-one calls with my father that were awkward but well-intentioned. Holiday visits that I kept as brief as possible. At each family gathering, Miranda's life was presented as the gold standard against which my existence was implicitly measured and found wanting. What my family didn't know, what I deliberately kept from them, was that I had begun freelancing on evenings and weekends, building custom blockchain solutions for clients Alex connected me with. These projects paid surprisingly well, sometimes more for a weekend of focused work than I earned in 2 weeks at TechFlow. I funneled this money directly into savings and investments, guided by financial websites and books, rather than asking my accountant father for advice. By my 3rd year at TechFlow, I had established a reputation in the local tech community as a blockchain specialist. I spoke at small developer meetups, contributed to industry blogs, and built a network of contacts through Alex's introductions. Meanwhile, the startup's fortunes continued to rise, and my contributions were increasingly recognized by management. My mother remained unimpressed. "Computers are just a phase," she insisted during one particularly frustrating phone call. "These tech companies come and go. Miranda's firm has been established for 50 years. That's stability." What she couldn't see, what I wasn't ready to reveal, was that my combined income from TechFlow and freelancing now exceeded what my father had earned at the peak of his accounting career. My investment portfolio was growing steadily. I was no longer living paycheck to paycheck, but building actual wealth, quietly and without fanfare. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. A major tech company, GlobalSys, approached me after seeing a blockchain implementation I had developed for a TechFlow client. They needed someone to lead a new division focused on blockchain integration with their existing enterprise products. The salary they offered was triple what I made at TechFlow, with stock options, comprehensive benefits, and relocation assistance to their headquarters in Seattle. The decision should have been simple, but I hesitated. TechFlow had given me my start when no one else would. Alex had mentored me when I needed guidance. Leaving felt like abandonment. After several long conversations with Alex, who insisted I'd be foolish not to take the opportunity, I accepted the position. "Just don't forget us little people when you're a tech mogul," Alex joked at my goodbye party. I packed my belongings, signed the lease on a new apartment in Seattle, sight unseen, and prepared for the next chapter. But I made a conscious decision that puzzled my new employers. I asked them not to announce my hiring on their usual social media channels. I wasn't ready for my family to know about this leap forward. Some childish part of me wanted to see how long I could succeed in silence, accumulating achievements that remained invisible to the people who had defined my worth for so long. As I drove north to Seattle, I reflected on how far I'd come from the self-doubting college graduate who had been forced to move back home. The road ahead looked promising, but the shadows of my childhood still lengthened behind me. Financial success was one thing. Emotional freedom from the patterns established in my family was another challenge, entirely one that money couldn't solve. But for the first time, I was beginning to believe I might eventually succeed at both. 2 years into my position at Globalsys Life had transformed in ways I once couldn't have imagined. My role as blockchain integration lead had expanded to directing a team of 12 developers. The projects under my supervision had generated millions in revenue, earning me recognition from executive leadership and substantial bonuses. My combined salary bonuses and vested stock options pushed my annual income well into 6 figures. I had purchased a modern 3-bedroom house in a desirable Seattle neighborhood, paid off my student loans completely, and built an investment portfolio that any financial advisor would approve. My home office contained state-of-the-art equipment that made my previous setups look like children's toys. I drove a new Audi, wore tailored clothes, and no longer checked my bank balance before making purchases. Yet to my family, I remained the underachieving younger brother working at some computer company. I had maintained the fiction that I was still at a modest startup, never correcting their assumptions about my financial situation. Each time my mother mentioned Miranda's luxury lifestyle, I simply nodded and changed the subject. Each time she made a concerned comment about my career path, I deflected rather than defended. I wasn't ready to reveal my success, though I couldn't fully articulate why even to myself. During this time, cracks began appearing in Miranda's perfect facade. Our occasional text exchanges, once filled with her exciting updates, took on a different tone. She confided that her marriage to Bradley, a fellow marketing executive she'd met 4 years earlier, was failing. The demanding travel schedule that my mother bragged about to neighbors was taking a toll on her health and relationships. The luxury condo had become a financial strain after Bradley moved out. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a normal job with normal hours," she wrote in one late-night text. "To not have Mom introducing me as Miranda from Princeton every time I visit." These glimpses behind the curtain of her supposedly perfect life surprised me. For the first time, I considered that being the golden child might carry its own burdens. The pedestal my mother had placed her on was precarious, and the fear of falling seemed to consume her. During a rare brother-sister lunch when she visited Seattle for a conference, Miranda admitted something that stunned me. "I've always been jealous of you, Toby," she said, using my childhood nickname that no one else used anymore. "The way you could pursue what you actually wanted without Mom's expectations crushing you." I nearly choked on my water. "Are you serious? My entire childhood was spent hearing how I'd never measure up to you." She looked genuinely sad. "And my entire childhood was spent terrified of disappointing her. 1 B+, and it was like I'd committed a crime. You gotta be normal. I had to be exceptional always." This conversation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our family dynamic. Miranda had been as much a victim of our mother's pathology as I had been, just in a different way. Her pedestal was also a prison. Despite this new perspective, family gatherings remained exercises in subtle psychological warfare. During Thanksgiving that year, my mother orchestrated the usual Miranda celebration, seemingly oblivious to the dark circles under my sister's eyes or her strained smile. When conversation turned to my work, my mother's dismissive comments came as predictably as the pumpkin pie. "These computer jobs seem so unstable," she remarked. "Your father's firm is hiring in the accounting department if you ever want something more secure." I noticed my father's uncomfortable expression, but as always, he remained silent. A new complication emerged during this visit. My parents, particularly my mother, began dropping hints about their financial situation. My father had developed heart problems the previous year and retired earlier than planned. Their retirement savings, while adequate, weren't as substantial as they had expected. Medical bills had accumulated. "Your sister has been so generous," my mother mentioned casually, "helping with your father's specialist appointments. Such a blessing to have a child with means." The hints grew less subtle over the following months. During phone calls, my mother would mention bill collectors or the cost of my father's medications. She began sending me articles about children supporting aging parents, asking my thoughts without directly asking for money. I found myself in an unexpected moral dilemma. I had more than enough resources to help them comfortably. Yet something held me back from offering. Perhaps it was the years of emotional wounds, or perhaps it was knowing that any financial assistance would come with strings attached. My money would never be as good as Miranda's money, just as my achievements had never been as good as Miranda's achievements. During this period, I met Sophia at a tech conference in Portland, where I was a featured speaker. Intelligent, independent, and refreshingly direct, she worked as a cybersecurity consultant and approached me after my presentation with specific questions about blockchain security. Our professional conversation evolved into dinner, which evolved into a long-distance relationship between Seattle and Portland. Sophia was the first person I was completely honest with about my family situation and financial reality. She listened without judgment, but didn't hesitate to offer her perspective. "You've created this elaborate deception," she observed during a weekend visit to my Seattle home. "You're successful by any objective measure, but you're still letting your mother control the narrative by hiding your success." "It's not deception exactly," I defended weakly. "I just don't volunteer information." "And why is that?" she pressed. "Are you waiting for some perfect moment of vindication? Or are you afraid that even your objective success won't be enough for her?" Her questions hit uncomfortably close to home. I had been waiting, I realized, for some dramatic moment of revelation. Some scenario where my mother would be forced to acknowledge that I had succeeded on my own terms. But Sophia helped me see that such a moment might never come naturally. I would have to create it by establishing new boundaries and refusing to participate in the familiar dynamics. The opportunity came sooner than expected. During a visit home for my father's birthday, my mother finally moved from hints to direct requests. We were sitting in the living room after dinner, Miranda noticeably absent due to a work emergency that I suspected was an excuse to avoid the tension. "Your father and I have been going over our finances." My mother began, her voice taking on the martyred tone I knew well. "The medical bills have really strained our resources. We may need to take out a second mortgage." She paused, clearly waiting for me to offer assistance. When I didn't immediately respond, she continued, "Miranda has been so helpful, but with her divorce and everything, she's stretched thin too. We hate to ask, but we wondered if you might be able to contribute something. Even a small amount would help." I considered my response carefully. "How much do you need?" My mother seemed surprised by the direct question. "Well, about 3,000 for the immediate bills, more eventually for the ongoing treatments." "I see," I said neutrally. "And you've already asked Miranda?" "Of course," my mother replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "She's been sending what she can each month, but with her condo payments and the divorce lawyers, she's in a difficult position." I nodded, thinking about my sister's texts describing her financial strain, the overtime she was working to maintain appearances. Meanwhile, I had more in my checking account than my parents needed, with substantial savings and investments beyond that. "I'll need to look at my finances," I said, neither committing nor refusing. My mother's expression hardened slightly. "I understand money might be tight with your computer job. We don't expect you to contribute what Miranda does. Anything would help." And there it was. Even in asking for my help, she couldn't resist the comparison, the implication that my sister's contribution would naturally be more substantial because her career was more successful. Something inside me finally snapped. "Actually, Mom, what exactly do you think I earn?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. She looked taken aback by the question. "Well, I assume it's a decent salary for your field. Enough for your apartment and car." "And what do you think my field is exactly?" My father was watching this exchange with growing concern, while my mother's expression turned from confusion to irritation. "Computers, programming, whatever they call it," she said dismissively. "Tobias, if you can't help, just say so. There's no need to be defensive." "I'm not being defensive. I'm genuinely curious about what you think I do, since you've never actually asked." "This isn't productive," she said with a sigh. The point is, we need help with medical bills, and as our son, we hoped you might contribute something." I took a deep breath, Sophia's words echoing in my mind about establishing boundaries and refusing to participate in toxic dynamics. Before I could respond, however, my mother added the final straw. "I know you've always done your best, but the reality is you'll never be as good as your sister. We're just asking for whatever you can manage." The room went silent. My father looked mortified, and something in me, some dam of patience and politeness constructed over decades, finally broke. I stood up, looked her directly in the eye, and said the words that had been building for 28 years. "Then ask her to pay your bills." The silence that followed my statement was so complete, I could hear the wall clock ticking in the dining room. My mother's face froze in an expression of shock. Her mouth slightly open, eyes widened. My father's eyebrows shot up, and he gripped the arms of his chair as if bracing for impact. The tension in the room was almost a physical presence pressing against my skin. Time seemed to slow down as I registered my own feelings. There was anger, certainly, but also an unexpected sense of relief. The words had been building inside me for so long that finally releasing them felt like setting down a heavy burden I'd been carrying since childhood. My mother recovered first, her expression shifting from shock to indignation. "How dare you speak to me that way, after everything we've done for you?" "What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" I asked, my voice steady. "Besides comparing me to Miranda my entire life, besides dismissing every achievement, every interest, every effort I've ever made." "That's not true," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "We supported you. We paid for your education. My partial scholarship and student loans paid for my education, I corrected, and emotional support. You've given me nothing but doubt and comparison since I was old enough to understand words." My father finally spoke, his voice quiet. "Tobias, I know you're upset, but your mother deserves respect." "Respect is earned," I replied, not unkindly, "and it goes both ways. Has she ever respected my choices, my career? Has she ever even asked what I actually do for a living beyond something with computers?" My mother's face flushed. "This is about the money, isn't it? If you can't help, just say so. There's no need for this. A tantrum." "This isn't about the money, Mom. It's about 28 years of being treated like I'm less valuable than my sister. And ironically, if you'd ever bothered to take an interest in my life, you'd know that I can easily help with Dad's medical bills." My mother scoffed. "On your programmer salary, please." I took out my phone, opened my banking app, and placed it on the coffee table between us, displaying my checking account balance. The six-figure number sat there undeniable. "That's just my checking account," I said quietly. "Not my savings, investments, or property." My mother stared at the screen, momentarily speechless. My father leaned forward, adjusting his glasses, his expression shifting from discomfort to surprise. "I'm the Blockchain Integration Director at GlobalSys," I continued. "I lead a team of 12 developers. My annual income is in the mid-six figures. I own a 3,000-square-foot house in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood. I paid off my student loans 2 years ago. I drive an Audi. But you wouldn't know any of that because you've never once asked about my career with genuine interest." "Why wouldn't you tell us this?" my mother demanded, finding her voice again. "Why would I? So you could find some way to diminish it. Compare it to Miranda's achievements." "No, thank you." "That's unfair," she protested weakly. "Is it? Let's be honest for once. If I had told you about my promotion 2 years ago, what would you have said? That Miranda made partner faster, that her company is more prestigious, that her MBA from Princeton outranks my computer science degree from State?" My mother didn't answer, but her expression told me I'd hit the mark. "The truth is," I continued, my voice softening slightly, "Miranda is struggling. Her marriage failed. Her job demands everything from her. She's helping you financially at great personal cost because she's still trying to be the perfect daughter. We've both been trapped in the roles you assigned us before we were old enough to have a say in the matter." My father stood up suddenly. "I need some water," he muttered, retreating to the kitchen. Whether he actually needed water or simply wanted to escape the confrontation was unclear. My mother's expression hardened. "So you've been hiding your success to what punish us? Prove some point." "No, Mom. I kept it private because I needed to believe in it myself first. I needed to know that I was successful by my own definition, not yours. And I needed to break free from this family pattern where my worth is measured against Miranda's." "You're being ridiculous," she said dismissively. "We've always been proud of both our children. When have you ever told me you were proud of me? Not that you were relieved I was doing well enough, but actually proud." She opened her mouth and closed it again, unable to recall a specific instance. My father returned from the kitchen, glass of water in hand, just in time to hear my question and my mother's telling silence. "I'm proud of you, son," he said quietly. "I should have said it more often." My mother shot him an irritated look. "Robert, don't encourage this behavior." "It's not behavior, Catherine. It's the truth. We've treated the kids differently. We both know it." This unexpected alliance with my father seemed to throw my mother off balance. She crossed her arms defensively. "Fine, congratulations on your job. Is that what you want to hear? Does that fix everything?" "This isn't about hearing specific words, Mom. It's about fundamentally changing how we relate to each other. I'm not a secondary character in the Miranda show anymore. I'm an adult who has built a successful life on my own terms. You can either respect that and develop a new relationship with me based on who I actually am, or we can continue this pattern where I limit my contact with you to protect my mental health." "Are you threatening to cut us off?" she asked, her voice rising. "Over some perceived slight from your childhood?" "It wasn't slight, and it wasn't just childhood. It's a continuing pattern, and I'm not threatening anything. I'm establishing boundaries. I'll help with Dad's medical bills, because I can, and because I want to. But my financial help comes with the condition that you stop comparing me to Miranda, stop dismissing my career, and start treating me with basic respect." My mother's face went through a rapid series of expressions: anger, disbelief, calculation, and finally a forced calm. "You've clearly built up quite a narrative in your head," she said. "If you want to help your father, we appreciate it. As for the rest, perhaps you should talk to someone professional about these feelings." It was classic deflection, framing my concerns as emotional problems rather than legitimate grievances. In the past, I might have backed down, second-guessed myself, or accepted the blame. Not anymore. "I have been talking to someone professional," I replied calmly. "My therapist has been quite helpful in identifying unhealthy family dynamics. She might even call this conversation progress." The mention of therapy seemed to surprise both my parents. My father looked thoughtful, while my mother's expression tightened further. "Well," she said stiffly, "it's getting late. Perhaps we should continue this another time." Translation: she wanted me to leave so she could regain control of the narrative. I nodded, reaching for my jacket. "I'll have my financial advisor set up a medical expense account for Dad tomorrow. All bills can be sent there directly. I'll text you the details." I hugged my father, who whispered, "I'm sorry, son," in my ear. I nodded acknowledgement, then turned to my mother. She accepted a brief, awkward hug without fully reciprocating. "Think about what I've said," I told her. "I want a better relationship with both of you, but not at the expense of my self-respect." The drive back to my hotel was surreal. My hands shook slightly on the steering wheel, adrenaline still coursing through my system. I had finally said what needed to be said, drawn boundaries that should have been established years ago. But the lingering question remained: would anything actually change? The aftermath unfolded gradually over the following weeks. My mother left several voicemails that cycled between guilt trips, dismissal of my concerns as dramatic, and awkward attempts to continue, as if nothing had happened. I responded with brief, polite texts, establishing that I wasn't interested in pretending the confrontation hadn't occurred. Miranda surprisingly became an unexpected ally. My father had apparently told her about our confrontation, and she called me the next day. About time, someone said it were her first words when I answered. I've been enabling her for years because it was easier than fighting. We had the longest, most honest conversation of our adult lives. The golden child and the scapegoat comparing notes on our shared trauma, recognizing how we'd both been manipulated to maintain our mother's preferred family narrative. Miranda admitted she was drowning in debt, trying to maintain the lifestyle our mother expected, while I confessed how I'd hidden my success out of fear it would never be enough. "We need to form a united front," she suggested. "No more triangulation, no more playing us against each other." My father visited me in Seattle the following weekend alone for the first time in my memory. We sat on my deck overlooking the city, and he apologized properly for his decades of passive enabling. "I thought I was keeping the peace," he admitted, "but I was really just teaching you that your feelings didn't matter as much as your mother's comfort." "Why did you stay?" I asked the question I'd wondered for years. He sighed heavily. "I loved her, still do. And there were good times too, though I know you might not remember them. But mostly I was a coward. It was easier to go along than to rock the boat." He looked at me with genuine admiration. "You're braver than I ever was." My mother was the slowest to respond meaningfully. When she finally called 2 weeks after the confrontation, her approach had shifted from dismissal to grudging acknowledgement. "Your father thinks we should try family counseling," she said, as if the idea originated entirely with him. "Would you be willing to participate?" It wasn't a full acceptance of responsibility, but it was a start. A small crack in the wall of denial she'd built around our family dynamics. I agreed to the counseling with the explicit condition that it would involve honest discussion of the favoritism and comparative parenting that had shaped my relationship with both parents. "Fine," she said after a long pause. "If that's what it takes to move forward." The first session was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, I had a long conversation with Sophia about everything that had transpired. "You did it," she said with a proud smile. "You broke the cycle." "Trying to," I corrected. "It's not fixed yet. Might never be completely fixed." "But you're not playing by their rules anymore," she pointed out. "That's the real victory." Looking back at that pivotal confrontation, I realized that the most significant change wasn't in my mother's behavior or even in our family dynamics. It was in me. For the first time in my life, I had defined my own worth, established my own boundaries, and refused to accept the narrative that had been imposed on me since childhood. The golden child and the scapegoat were both stepping out of their assigned roles, and while the path forward wasn't entirely clear, it was at least a path of our own choosing. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I found myself in a place of unexpected peace. The journey hadn't been smooth or simple, but the progress was undeniable. My relationship with my family had transformed in ways I once thought impossible, though the changes came gradually and with considerable effort from all sides. The family counseling sessions, initially tense and occasionally combative, provided a structured environment for addressing decades of harmful patterns. Our therapist, Dr. Landry, had a gift for naming dynamics without assigning blame, creating space for honest conversation without defensive reactions. "Families develop patterns that serve functions," she explained in an early session. "Understanding those functions is more productive than simply assigning fault." Through these sessions, I came to understand that my mother's obsession with Miranda's achievements stemmed from her own abandoned ambitions and deep-seated insecurities. This didn't excuse her behavior, but contextualizing it helped me separate her actions from my self-worth. Similarly, my father's passive enabling was rooted in conflict avoidance patterns from his own childhood. Again, not an excuse, but an explanation that helped depersonalize his failures. My individual therapy continued alongside the family sessions. Dr. Chen helped me process the lingering effects of growing up as the lesser child and developed strategies for maintaining boundaries without cutting ties completely. We worked on recognizing when old insecurities were influencing my current perceptions and relationships. "The goal isn't to erase the past," Dr. Chen reminded me, "but to prevent it from controlling your future." Professionally, my trajectory continued upward. GlobalSys promoted me to Director of Emerging Technologies, expanding my responsibilities beyond blockchain to include artificial intelligence integration and quantum computing research. The accompanying salary increase and stock options further solidified my financial security, though I found that money mattered less to me now that I'd established my value in other ways. My relationship with Sophia deepened into something I trusted completely. Unlike previous relationships where I'd hidden parts of myself or downplayed my success with Sophia, I could be authentically who I was, vulnerabilities and strengths alike. When I proposed during a weekend trip to Mount Rainier, her immediate yes felt like the natural progression of something already solid and true. "You know, this means eventually dealing with your mother as a mother-in-law," I warned her half-jokingly after slipping the ring on her finger. "I can handle Catherine," she said confidently. "The question is whether she can handle me." Miranda and I developed a genuine friendship for the first time in our lives. Free from our assigned roles as golden child and scapegoat, we discovered we actually liked each other as people. She had left her high-pressure marketing position for a smaller firm with reasonable hours and a supportive culture. The pay cut meant downsizing from her luxury condo, but she described her modest townhouse as the first home that's actually felt like mine, and not a showcase for Mom's bragging rights. During one of our regular video calls, she made an observation that struck me deeply. "You know what's weird? I think Mom needed the contrast between us more than either of us did. She needed me to be perfect, so she could feel successful as a parent. And she needed you to be less successful, so she could feel needed and superior. We were just playing parts in her internal drama." My father, perhaps motivated by his health scare and the realization of how his passivity had damaged his relationship with both children, made the most dramatic changes. He began standing up to my mother's more manipulative behaviors, attending his own therapy sessions, and making genuine efforts to connect with me about my actual interests, rather than defaulting to safe topics. During a visit to Seattle, where he met my team at Global Sys and saw firsthand the impact of my work, he expressed a regret that brought tears to my eyes. "I wish I had known how to see you clearly when you were growing up," he said as we walked through the modern office space where my blockchain projects were displayed on large screens. "You were always extraordinary in your own way. I just didn't have the right vocabulary to recognize it." My mother's evolution was slower and less complete, but still significant. The woman who had dismissed my career for decades now awkwardly mentioned to her friends that her son was some kind of technology executive in Seattle. She still occasionally slipped into old patterns of comparison or dismissal, but could now sometimes catch herself mid-sentence. In our most recent family counseling session, she managed something I never thought possible: a genuine, unqualified apology. "I compared you and your sister in ways that were harmful to you both," she admitted, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I put Miranda on a pedestal that almost broke her, and I dismissed your talents because they didn't fit my narrow definition of success. I'm sorry, Tobias. Truly sorry. It wasn't a perfect healing. Decades of patterns couldn't be undone in 6 months of therapy. There were still difficult moments, still times when old wounds felt freshly opened, but we were trying, all of us, to create something healthier than what we had before." The medical expense account I had set up for my father was working well, removing the financial stress that had contributed to family tension. My mother had initially been uncomfortable with accepting my help, her pride battling with practical necessity. But my father's worsening condition made the decision ultimately simple. The gift came with no strings attached beyond my established boundaries about respect and recognition. As Sophia and I planned our wedding for the following spring, I reflected on how different my life was now compared to a year ago. Not just externally with career success and financial security, but internally. The constant background noise of inadequacy had quieted. The reflexive self-doubt when faced with challenges had diminished. I still had moments of insecurity, but they no longer defined me. At our engagement dinner, attended by both our families, my mother made a toast that demonstrated just how far we had come. "To Tobias and Sophia," she said, raising her glass. "My son has always forged his own path even when I couldn't understand it. That independence has led him to professional success, but more importantly to finding someone who appreciates him exactly as he is. I'm proud of the man you've become, Tobias." The words "I'm proud" from my mother's lips felt surreal. They weren't dramatic or overly emotional, just a simple acknowledgement that had been withheld for too long. My father squeezed my shoulder as she spoke, his eyes conveying what we both knew: this was progress, imperfect, but genuine. Later that evening, after our families had departed and Sophia was showing her parents to their hotel, Miranda texted me a simple message. We did it. We broke the cycle. And that perhaps was the most profound healing of all. Not just that I had established my worth independent of comparison, but that Miranda and I had both escaped the roles assigned to us. The golden child and the scapegoat had rewritten their stories, and in doing so began to free the next generation from continuing the pattern. As I prepare to start my own family with Sophia, I carry the lessons of my childhood with me, not as wounds, but as wisdom. I know the damage that comparison can inflict, the harm in conditional love, the importance of seeing each child as an individual with unique gifts, rather than competitors in some imagined hierarchy of worth. The journey isn't over. Healing rarely follows a neat linear path. There will be setbacks, moments when old patterns resurface, times when boundaries need to be reasserted. But the foundation has been laid for something healthier, something truer than what came before. Standing up in that living room, 6 months ago, saying those simple words, "Then ask her to pay your bills," was just the beginning. The real work came after, in the patient rebuilding of relationships on new terms, in the consistent maintenance of boundaries, in the ongoing commitment to authenticity, even when it would be easier to slip back into familiar roles. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you've recognized elements of your own family dynamics, your own assigned roles, your own struggles to define yourself beyond the narratives imposed in childhood. If so, I hope my journey offers some small encouragement that change is possible, that patterns can be broken, that it's never too late to stand up and claim your own worth. Have you ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you? How did you find the courage to break free from roles assigned to you? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can rewrite their story. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worth isn't determined by comparisons to others. It exists independently, inherently, irrevocably within you.